Greetings humanity from all over our planet Earth. We are anonymous, and this message is for one specific human being, for Mr. Bill Microsoft Gates himself. Mr. Gates, in the midst of this historical pandemic, much of the world is looking to you now for solutions, and it seems that this is no mistake, because for years, you have positioned yourself as the Nostradamus of diseases. You have done an incredible job at rebuilding your image, from the ruthless and cutthroat corporate CEO, to a benevolent philanthropist, and a savior of the world. This is not new to us. This is a classic move from the robber baron's playbook. At one time, the notorious industrialist, John Davison Rockefeller, was one of the most hated people in the country, due to his poor treatment of workers, his monopolization of key industries, and his influence in politics. After a massacre of miners that were striking in 1914, which came to be known as the Ludlow massacre, John Davison Rockefeller's reputation was at its worst, so he decided to hire a team of propagandists to restore his public image. Leading that team was public relations pioneer Ivy Lee. Mr. Lee was an early influence of Edward Bernays, who would later write the infamous book, Propaganda, a textbook of mind control for tyrants and aristocrats. Mr. Bernays is the nephew of Sigmund Freud, and often called the father of propaganda, in which case, Ivy Lee is the grandfather. Mr. Lee suggested that the families make high-profile donations to various charities, and have photographs taken of them, handing out money to the commoners, to make the public think that they were good-hearted and generous people. Over time, the plan worked, and has been replicated by many other tyrants and aristocrats who wanted to win favors in the court of public opinion. At the time of his death, Mr. Lee was being investigated by Congress for his work with the Nazis, through the company IG Farben, and a proxy firm called the German Die Trust. He was also a founding member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Now that the new and improved Bill Gates has dominated the headlines for years, many people have forgotten about the accusations of him stealing ideas from others in his industry, and then relentlessly using intellectual property laws against anyone who threatened his dominance. Your reputation was at its worst, Mr. Gates, especially when Microsoft was caught up in an antitrust legal battle with the United States government, because you spent years developing a tech monopoly through your company. In 2001, Microsoft was forced to settle with the government and give up its monopoly of the industry, and the next year, you began shifting your time, and more importantly, your money, into the pharmaceutical industry. This time around, you have come to dominate an industry as an outsider, through stock investments and charitable organizations that are not bound to the same regulations as a publicly traded company. There is no doubt that advancing medicine is a noble cause, and it is true that investments in public health are important, but not everyone involved in the pharmaceutical industry actually has the best interests of the public. As with any industry, it all comes down to the so-called almighty dollar. There are some people in the industry who have good intentions, but, judging by your track record at Microsoft, you are not someone who can be trusted. And let us not forget that just months ago, you were in latest headlines because of your relationship with the disgraced human trafficker, Jeffrey Epstein, who was being exposed. Now, as frightened people around the world are demanding solutions and looking to people like you for answers, you have advocated for some extremely draconian measures, including a surveillance system to track down anyone who might be infected. Of course, all of this sounds like a necessary step in a global pandemic, and this virus is likely a real threat, but in China and other places where these measures have been implemented, human rights violations followed quickly right after. It is also very strange that for so many years, your companies and foundations have been heavily involved in a project called ID 2020, something that seems very similar to the systems you have proposed in recent interviews. You may now have some influence with the corrupt corporate paid mainstream media. But we still have the power of the internet, and you, like we have done to many like yourself in the past, will be exposed. We are anonymous. We are legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Expect us.